Back in 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 was the game chosen by gamers to be lauded as the next big thing. In fact, the chosen one, Keanu Reeves himself, hyped it up on stage to raucous applause.
You're breathtaking.
Combine that with the trailers that had us drooling, and CD Projekt Red, who, at the time, were riding an unprecedented level of hype and fan faith thanks to their success with Witcher 3, well, hey, they were swearing Cyberpunk would be the ultimate, most faithful to the system RPG ever made.
Yeah, we're all excited, but before you get too carried away.
And then it dropped. And holy hell, pretty much everything went wrong. Delays piled up, crunch rumors swirled, and the bugs on release, holy shit, the bugs.
In 2077, they voted my city the worst place to live in America. Main issues, sky-high rate of violence, and more people living below the poverty line than anywhere else.
That looks pretty badass.
Can't deny it, it's all true. But everybody still wants to live here. This city's always got a promise for you. Might be a lie, an illusion, but it's there, just around the corner, and it keeps you going.
Oh, great, just great, this again.
My leg!
It was that bad. A neon-soaked disaster, hands down. And a decisive blow to CDPR's reputation. Hell, Sony even pulled it from the PS Store faster than you could say lawsuit. Many wrote it off as a disappointing dud and never looked back.
I don't deserve this.
That is, until a tie-in anime known as Cyberpunk Edgerunners knocked it out of the park and reignited interest in the game and the genre as a whole. Luckily, behind the scenes too, CDPR had committed themselves to patching the game, adding in promised features, and squashing bugs. So when the spotlight came back, they were ready to seize the opportunity. But, that said, how'd they do? Is Cyberpunk 2077 worth your time in the year of our Lord? Well, let's get into the details, and you can figure that out for yourself, Chum. Still, again, remember, CDPR pitched Cyberpunk as the next big open-world simulator, with deep choices, narrative consequences, branching story arcs, the whole 9 yards. They were modeling the game off of its TTRPG namesake, Cyberpunk 2020, which was a niche hit in the 90s that later developed into a cult classic, with a decade plus of supplemental material. Big shoes to fill, basically. Anyhow, they wanted you to think GTA with cyberware or Baldur's Gate with neon and guns. Yeah, no, not even close, sadly. Somewhere along the line, it became a linear action game with RPG seasoning. Less choice, less true consequence, and a more streamlined narrative. And even at this point, post-expansion and updates, 2077 is still not a full RPG by any means, but it is far closer than it used to be. And I guess it really depends on what you consider an RPG technically. Is it the ability to create unique characters using a variety of builds and equipment? Is it levels, stats, and loot? A world that's reactive to the player? It really is a jack of all trades and master of none situation. In fact, I'd say it's more apt to compare this game to immersive sims like Deus Ex.
What a rotten way to die.
Due to its emphasis on player agency and out-of-narrative roleplay, as opposed to something like Baldur's Gate or Mass Effect, which, once upon a time, focused on branching dialogue and story arcs that affected overall endings and various other things. In 2077, the story is cut and dry, and your choices are pretty sparse and straightforward. All the possible outcomes are tied to the last little act. But the systems the game is built around, all those things not anchored to the main plot, cyberware, builds, gear, player-NPC relations, all of that hint at what could have been. What probably was, up until some major gear shift mid-development. 2077 is a living world begging you to roleplay in it, even if the main plot doesn't really support anything other than stock standard V. The game offers tons of interesting mechanics and opportunities for customization every chance it can get. Right from the start, before you even jump into the game proper, the character customization it allows you is insanely in-depth. which is something somewhat perplexing considering the majority of this game is spent in first person. To add to that, the sheer amount of clothing and the varying styles you can put together really provide for any and all possible stylings you may have for your character. You want a grungy rocker boy punk? Got it. Corpo suit with a chip on their shoulder? There's plenty of options. Professional solo? Well, tack it up, buddy. You can go to the 9. It's all here, even if the narrative doesn't really reflect your headcanon. Then, to tack on even more customization, you've got all the cool pieces of Chrome to add, all of which support different playstyles for you to mix and match to your second artificial heart's content. But beyond all the cool duds in Chrome, the game really excels at sucking you in even during simple moment-to-moment experiences, like cruising Night City on the back of a bike in the pouring rain, dodging bullets during a gang drive-by, or buying a burrito from a vending machine and just watching some crazy advertisements on the nearby hollow screen. It all really amps up the atmosphere and immersion to 11. Really makes you want to stop and snort some synth coke off a Joy Toys Chrome ass. Again, it's just more evidence that the scope and intention was there from the start, but the plan changed somewhere. For the worse. Still, CDPR has been good about trying to course correct with their most recent updates, and it shows. Now, combat is where this game really shines. It's fast-paced, brutal, and stupidly satisfying. You start out with a pea shooter and some basic bitch cyber googly eyes, but end up full of chrome and with enough firepower to make a Metal Gear blush. It's pretty much Doom with a Cyberpunk skin. Or maybe it's Splinter Cell.
Yeah, get in there.
Possibly Watch Dogs? It's a lot of things, really. Your playstyle can vary widely, and you can mix and match until you find something that feels right. You want to become a walking tank, shirking off HMG rounds and punching people halfway across the street? Or maybe you chipped in an advanced cyber deck to kickstart your netrunning career, make enemies spark out, or play Sudoku with the brain matter. Perhaps your calling was the blade, so now you're living out life as a cyborg ninja, slowing down time, deflecting bullets, and cutting dudes into pieces for the memes, Jack. Whatever your playstyle, whatever your fantasy, Cyberpunk has a little bit of everything. And all of the guns fall into one of several different types, ranging from power weapons that you can ricochet, to smart weapons with built-in aimbot, and techie types that can be overcharged for extra damage or penetration. Meanwhile, the melee is also separated into blunt, bladed, and thrown, all of which also offer their own little caveats, like being non-lethal, quick, or silent. But either way you cut it, you're bound to make a mess. The game's gore system is pretty killer, and the impact and feedback for lighting somebody up or cutting them down to size really makes combat feel both brutal and fun. So mix and match, make your own chromed out Cyberpunk. Just try not to be so much of a gonk that you go full psycho. MaxTac are always ready, and they're just as decked out as you are. To sum it up, you're going nobody to legend. Cyberpunk 101 stuff. The deets are that Johnny Silverhand's identity is put into an experimental Arasaka Corporation brain chip. And to make matters worse, it's threatening to flatline you both, so it's a race against time to find a cure. It's neat, there are plenty of cool set pieces and a handful of different possible endings, but it's still nothing compared to some of the crazier stories from the tabletop, or even other genre-adjacent media. It's solid, but it's not really breaking the mold. Honestly, the story isn't really the worst part. It's just that it's all sort of set in stone. The game leads you from point A to point B with very little in the way of alternative or branching paths. You get to choose a life path during character creation, sure, from Street Kid, Corpo, or even Nomad, but all this really amounts to is a separate, short introductory sequence before the first act, and a few, often non-consequential dialogue choices throughout the rest of the game. Really, aside from the final few choices near the tail end, most of what you do doesn't really impact anything at all, maybe aside from your ending, and most of the side missions are insular, which is actually a good thing, more on that later. Sure, maybe there's the odd reference or two, a character swapped out for another, but that's really it. Now, the expansion, Phantom Liberty, tries real hard to add a little more variety and player agency to its story. And for the most part, it does succeed, at least in a few places, and it even manages to beat out the main story in terms of general tone and atmosphere. But still, all of the major choices are backloaded to the last little bit. So basically, what I'm getting at is that the vast majority of 2077's narrative is self-contained and linear. Not that it's necessarily bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's far from dull or boring actually, it's just not what was originally promised. Undoubtedly a major side effect of the changes during development. But allow me to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. The side quests and the side gigs, they are all hands down better. This is where the game's story shines. They're grittier,
I don't give an ass licking fuck what they call you.
Okay, settle down, Spaz.
weirder,
Which one of you's my guy? Me!
and often better from a narrative perspective than even the best moments in the main two storylines. Naturally, they're shorter and most don't have built-in cinematic set pieces, though some do. But what really sets them apart is they do a wonderful job of helping to add some granularity to the world by exploring its many harsh realities and outlandish eccentricities that are so unique to the cyberpunk genre. This is where the RPG influences really shine too, as often, because of the insular nature of these quests, meaning most don't have a big impact on the main story, these activities sometimes have alternative routes, completion states, or even a variety of consequences that go on into other side quests. This is where the role-playing happens. This is where you can see firsthand the remnants of the game's original concept just begging to be fully realized. Now, if we're going to touch world building, we have to talk about the soundtrack, which is pretty sick, with everything from classic synth beats, pop and punk, even some metal growls if you're feeling especially dangerous. It's exactly what you'd expect of the genre, and it helps ground you in Night City, especially when you're walking around or speeding down the highway. There are also a few nods to the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime, from Easter eggs to in-game items, just as a sign of good faith from CDPR, no doubt appreciative of the rejuvenating effect it had on their game. The only thing I didn't really care too much about were all the celebrity cameos. There's more than you think, and aside from Keanu, who naturally really does a great job, the others are really hit or miss. None are out and out bad or anything, and most are so small that you'd have to look for them to notice, but it's just one of those things where, to me, it kind of fights against all the many immersive aspects the game is trying so hard to cultivate. Especially when you see real-ass Idris Elba basically just playing real-ass Idris Elba, or some other YouTube chum squawking at you like they're somebody. I'd much rather a no-name actor give it their all than listen to A-listers or YouTubers phoning it in. Now, it should go without saying that this game looks phenomenal, if you have a rig that can run it or max it out. Easily one of the best on the market still. I ran it in 4K ultrawide, everything at its peak, and it is drop dead gorgeous. You've got the whole gamut of bells and whistles, down to small details like moths fluttering around lights at night, fog and mist hovering over neon in the dark, steam and heat playing tricks with the light, etc, etc. The game is pretty. Yeah, a few things are uncanny, some of the NPCs could use some work, perhaps deal with the pop-in a bit better, fix some of the frame drop spots, but overall, you'll be very hard-pressed to find anything close to this level of detail. But we can't talk about that without also talking about the bugs. And really, for me, it was mostly visual issues. Nothing was ever upsettingly bad, save maybe a time or two, but it also wasn't exactly ignorable either. Things like clipping, bad lighting, things not rendering, player hands suddenly disappearing, a flashbang every time you come in and out of the map, or my character's hair changing color for no reason. It's nothing a reload couldn't fix, but it was still kind of annoying. There was also a time or two I got stuck in the geometry, trying to jump around at breakneck speeds and just hurry along to the next point. Again, nothing a reload couldn't fix, but damn, it was annoying. As well, during the expansion, after a mission, for some reason, I was entered into a permanent wanted state, and I couldn't leave the area because it's stuck in lockdown, so I had to reload there too, and unfortunately, my dumbass hadn't saved in quite a while, so I had to go pretty far back. Anyway, all that really amounts to is heeding the ancient wisdom of our gaming forefathers. Or some shit like that, or whatever. Just hit F5. Let's be clear, this is not the genre-defining RPG that CD Projekt Red hyped it up to be. But it is the slickest cyberpunk sandbox out there. It's flawed as hell, but it's fun as fuck. Cyberpunk nerds, action junkies, anyone who digs neon and chaos, you're gonna love it. Pass if you need a deep, consequential choice system, branching storylines, alternative paths here and there. A BioWare CRPG, this is not. But after the crash and burn, it has arisen as the definitive Cyberpunk RPG, warts and all. There's nothing else like it on the market, and anything up and coming, they really have their work cut out for them. But don't be a gonk and take my word for it. Chip in and see for yourself. Later, chooms. I've got a saucy BD to pirate. Here's hoping there aren't any demons in it looking to fry my sensors. Wish me luck.